Hi, my name is Bree. I'm really excited to be here. I'm about to have a wonderful conversation with Prosper on the Online Prosperity Show. Tune in because this is what you're going to hear about, how I actually allowed myself to color outside the lines and to take a different journey from being a chartered accountant to actually lock in, connect with myself and create a life that I actually really enjoy living, and how that you can actually do something really similar for yourself as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today we have a guest whose journey is nothing short of extraordinary. Now, Bree, how are you doing today?
I am fabulous today, thank you, Prosper, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, who wouldn't be fabulous if your role and your job is to help ordinary people create extraordinary lives for themselves? I bet every single day somebody comes and shakes you up and says, Bree, because of you, I did not give up. I mean, fantastic.
It does tend to happen. I never expected that was going to be the result, but it does actually happen from time to time.
Absolutely. I mean, in this world we live in, if you're not making anybody else's life better, then what good are you doing for humanity? For those that are tuning in for the very first time on the Online Prosperity Show, welcome. And I can't wait to share my next guest with you. Now, I want you to imagine having dedicated your life to a career, and this is basically not just any timeline. This is dedicating 2 decades to a structured world of finance, only to pivot into the realm of personal transformation. Now, that's precisely the path that Bree undertook, and she was once a chartered accountant who was immersed in corporate projects, and now she channels her expertise into guiding individuals towards their dream lives as a transformational life coach. Now, her story is true testament to the power of reinvention and just backing yourself, really, because if what you are doing was the be and end all for not only you but a lot of people having to pivot and change and still become a successful person in a new field, that actually says a lot about our guest today. So it's the power of self-discovery and the courage to embrace change that we're going to be exploring on the show today. So buckle up as we dive into Bree's experiences, the challenges she overcame, and also the invaluable insights that she gained along the way. Now, Bree, I could go on and talk about things that I'm not even qualified to start mentioning. Take us back to the time in your career days. What was it like?
Well, what's quite interesting is that the timing of this conversation coincides with February 1995, so 30 years ago this year. Hard to imagine I'm that old, was when I just entered the world as a brand new little graduate accountant at what was then called Pricewaterhouse. And so what's really kind of interesting is I had, when you're coming out of high school, there's this requirement at 17 years old to figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life. And I remember sitting there looking through it was called the V.E.A guide, which was all around all the university degrees, etc. out there. And I got to the end of the book and I went, oh, there's nothing much in here that really appeals to me. So what on earth am I going to do? And maybe if I read the book from back to front, I might see it differently. So it's a shift in perspective. Let me see if I shift my perspective and approach it differently. Something might drop out of it. And what ultimately did was the decision to go and put myself through a commerce degree at Melbourne University, because I had been doing accounting and economics in high school. I tended to be able to speak the language of debits and credits because, as I've come to understand across my life, it is like a different language and you either kind of get it or you don't. And for me, it was something that came quite easily in understanding the pattern between the debits and the credits and how it all came together. And so I thought, in the absence of any burning desire in any other direction, I may as well head down this path. And so I looked like one of those people that's very focused, very goal-oriented, that knew exactly where I was going and what I was doing. And I was, to a degree, in terms of getting the actual university degree, doing what I needed to do to get myself in to one of the big, what was then the big 6 accounting firms. So at least I had a pathway up to that level. And so coming into February 1995, I thought I was it in a bit, in my suit, heading into work, about to embark on this career. And it was the best of times when you're starting with 50 other people of your same age group and you're sort of working through the layers when they'd say the average age of the office was 26 years old. It's a pretty good place to be. And you're learning lots and you're doing lots of things and the advancement is coming thick and fast because you're always learning and you're moving ahead. But what's really interesting is when you go into that chartered accounting environment, there's usually kind of 2 schools of people going in. There's the ones who want to get chartered and then move out straight into industry. They've got different plans about where they want to be. And then there are the others who want to keep going and to be a partner in one of those firms. And I was neither. And that's okay in the early days because you're there to experience, to learn, to find out all these things, to actually get to know yourself as an adult. Because I walked into that place at 21 years old as a very impressionable, young person about to embark on a career. And as I went along, I didn't have an answer to that question because I'm watching my friends leave, get their chartered accounting qualification and move out into industry. And some of that included going and doing a stint overseas because we were pretty hot property over in the UK back in those days. And that didn't appeal to me in that sense either. And so I just kept moving through the ranks at what then became PwC. But I'd made it my mission to expand and take on lots of other things so that I wasn't just someone who popped out at the end who said, I've done 200 audits. Because I was actually, I was working in the audit and assurance part of the business. So during that time, I developed presentation skills. I was doing training. I was writing training methodology. I was a subject matter expert in all manner of different industries at different points in time and building up all this awesome skill base. But one of the things I kept saying and noticing that I was saying all the time was, oh yeah, I'm an accidental accountant. This wasn't ever my career plan. This is just where I've ended up. And so as any career does, and as you go through stuff, I was just trialing different versions. There was a time that came for me, it was time to leave PwC. And I went into the world of commercial finance, in industry. And I lasted in that role for about 18 months because what I came to realize about myself, the routine of month end and weekly results review and the budget and forecast process made me want to stick pins in my eyes. Because one of the things I value quite deeply, and I've come to understand about myself through the Tony Robbins 6 Human Needs work that he's done, is that I really highly value variety and contribution. And I didn't feel like I was getting it in that space. And so as time kept coming along, I started to branch out and I was working in transformation projects. And I was helping implement systems, doing change projects within organizations and working in the management consulting space. And whilst there was tons of things about those environments that I really enjoyed, there was still a lot of friction points and something didn't quite feel like me in the way that was always coming together. And I guess I reached the crossroads when I was finding myself working really hard, really long hours, not loving what I was doing and just feeling really worn out and realizing that was a pattern that was being created time and time again. So I'd take a break, I'd do something new, I'd freshen up, but I'd end up back in that spiral that just felt like it was going down, down the staircase rather than sort of spiraling up. And it was around that time. And for years, I'd had an executive coach and she kept saying to me, you should do coaching. You know, there was these reasons why you'd be great in the coaching space. And I kept saying, yeah, okay, cool. But, you know, what have I got to offer in terms of those types of scenarios? Because it was just something that didn't feel like it was on the path at that point in time. So what I was doing was looking for something that was still within the boundaries of the path that I was on. And I was just looking for something that felt like the most or the more aligned option within that same frame of being in a business or in some sort of service provider role in terms of management consulting, etc. And anytime I started to think a little bit outside the lines, I got a bit freaked out and I shrunk back in again because the effort or, to use an accounting term, sunk costs felt really, really high. So even though it's a sunk cost, you're not meant to actually take them into your consideration of the decision that you do next because it's past. It's like I spent 2 decades cultivating myself as a chartered accountant, and anyone who's done their professional year to get the chartered accounting degree still remembers how hard it was. Doesn't matter how many decades have passed, because it is a big hurdle to get over and it embeds itself very deeply into your identity and your self-image in your professional life because you've done this thing. You've got this qualification. You've got these layers that you've built up in terms of what you do. So doing anything that was going to stray massively outside of those lines felt pretty scary. And kind of who was I to think that I could do that?
Absolutely. Right.
And so then there came this really interesting moment where I was feeling kind of worn out, but I was doing a lot of contract consulting work. So there was opportunities to take a breather, and we were winding down on a project that had been kind of fun to do. And I put in a call to my electrician. The last time I'd spoken to him was several years earlier, and I just wanted to check in on something. I needed his input. And when I had emailed him, I hadn't got a response, which just kind of was unusual for the way he tended to operate his business, and he was usually on top of this. And something compelled me to call him. And when I was chatting to him, he said, yeah, I haven't been an electrician for years. About 3 months after I did the work on your house, I became a mindset coach. And my mind kind of exploded in that moment because I was that person who kept saying for years, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And I keep just adding new things into my toolkit because I like experiences and variety, and I'm always searching for growth and contribution. So I kept doing that. And then when I heard about him taking this massive pivot, I was like, how did you do that? Because every time I tried, I went back inside the lines. And so I became a client of his and started on my own personal development journey because I think the timing of when I had that conversation as well, I was feeling, as I said, like I was kind of going down the death spiral. Things weren't kind of working. And on paper, depending on how you measured success or what you might have described as a rich life, I had one in terms of I had a kind of a high esteem job. You know, it earned me a good living. I got to do really cool things in those roles, like go and live in New York City and learn some stuff over there and work in different places and do various trips. But if I looked at other parts of my life, things were not working very well, and some were actually downright terrible. And so when I actually checked in with myself, I was feeling very unsettled and very kind of disconnected with who I actually was at my core. I'm not even sure I could have told you who that was. And I think when we're so busy just living life and trying to get through every day, we've got this version of ourselves that shows up into the world day in, day out, that does the things, that's defined by the job we do, the qualifications we have, the things we do and that we have at a point in time. But then there's the real us at our core. And after a point in time, that disconnect gets bigger. For some people, it looks like a midlife crisis and they go buy a Ferrari or go and do those things. For others, they go on a personal development journey because they want to connect those two people.
Absolutely.
And
Wow.
so for me, I was about connecting those two people. Now, at that point in time, I couldn't have articulated that at all. I just knew I felt blur and unsettled, and there was a lot of friction and not a lot of fulfillment. Or there was
Mm.
pockets of fulfillment. But when I now think about it, and I guess the words I would use now is that I want to live a really rich life. And that rich life has got nothing to do with money.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like the money and the abundance helps to fund it. But rich for me is a rich connection with myself, rich relationships, rich experiences, rich contribution, rich growth in myself, the ripple effect that I can help others create along the
Mm.
way. And so as that started to unfold in actually spending time with myself and looking at things and understanding transformation, that's where the idea started that maybe it was time to exit being in that corporate role, in that chartered accountant type space, because that maybe that I was climbing the wrong ladder.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for taking us through. I mean, obviously, you did say it was 30 years. So, of course, you really did it justice there. But I want to take you back a little bit, Bree, just so that we can, um, interact with this 17-year-old again who's now faced with this decision in life that they had to make. Now,
Mm.
was there pressure for you to actually get it right, either from family or the people around you at that particular time? Because most people might have just wanted to make sure they get it right just so they don't disappoint those around them.
Yeah, so really interesting that the words you chose then was get it right. Because in the moment, I didn't necessarily think I felt that, but that thought or belief around get it right is something that I have now discovered has kind of tagged me all the way through. It's like
Mm.
being my own like little cookie tag that I've
Right.
had attached to the way I operate. My parents, and I've always said this, my parents um, never had any specific expectations on us or requirements in terms of what we do. They've supported both my brother and I's decisions in whatever direction we've taken. I did have pressure at school, though, of someone who was very academically smart, that often they thought the decisions I was making were inappropriate.
Mm.
And it actually did backfire at one point because I had the teachers call mum down to say, well, she's too smart to not be doing physics and chemistry. And my mother backed me, not them, in terms of the decisions that I made. So what's kind of interesting is I didn't ever feel it in the family unit, which is often where it does first show up in around that. And even doing a massive career shift later on, all mum and dad say is, are you happy? Is everything going okay? What do you need?
Mm.
And dad always jokes that he never understood what I did before and he doesn't understand what I do now. So nothing's really changed in that kind of sense. But I think it did start a piece of at school, there were these expectations around what I should be opening myself up to based on my book smartness and my ability to retain information and extract knowledge and do well on exams, which is not the same as life experience and creating outcomes and transformation in your world. But in that space, I was pretty good.
Mm.
I remember doing the chartered accounting qualification and being terrified of failing one of the exams. And they were really hard. The first one, I bawled my eyes out when I learned I passed it because it was tax and it was hard. And I hadn't done the level of work necessary in hindsight to help me across the line, and I passed it. But I was terrified, and I realized when I was checking in with what I was feeling, I was worried what everybody else was going to say, because I was that person who'd never failed a subject in my life or any
Mm.
test or anything like that. So I see a little bit of a pattern there. And then as I've worked through my career, and particularly in my PwC life, an audit partner looked a certain way in terms of how they showed up, how they behaved, where their skills were. And I was a little bit confusing for people because I could still get the results, but I came at it a little bit of a different way. And so then that getting it right became you're pretty good and you get the results, but you don't quite do it the way we think you should.
Right.
So it almost became this, I'm not quite right. I'm almost there, but I'm not quite.
Is
So
that
this,
is that why at 26 you are now at the fork of, do I get chatted out, or do I keep climbing the ladder? Because that's the one part where you would have been looking at those that are going out the charted way and you didn't look like them, and those that were going up the ladder, you didn't look like them. So would that have
yeah.
created that conundrum at that juncture?
Yeah, it did. And that's why I thought I'm just going to keep going where I am because this still feels okay. I can't see myself at the top level, but there's a lot I can learn and there's a lot of skills I can get from here. And let's see what opens up. And I
Mm.
ended up going to work for an audit client. So the exit was easy as well. I had multiple opportunities in that space. And, I selected one at the time that it was right for me. And I had some really, really cool things available to me in that. But I wanted to make sure that at whatever point I felt like I was at that point where I needed to step out and I felt more ready to,
Mm.
that I had a broader skill set. Or if I decided that I really wanted to go for the top job, then I also had that behind me as well. And for a period of time, I was going for the top job. And then the global financial crisis hit. And it was probably the best outcome that I didn't keep going because I didn't see that as a long-term future for me in that partnership role. But so I just kept expanding and learning and going along. And I remember at the GFC time when there was conversation that like partner was off the table, I started having all these ideas. My friend and I were going to flip houses. Maybe I wanted to go and be an osteo. And I went to be a commercial finance person in one of my audit clients because that felt like it was still in the lanes. I was still within the lines that I was colouring, within at that point in time. So yeah, there was a couple of different crossroads, and each of those points in time, I made a choice and I made a decision, but I still stayed within the lane that I'd started with when I made that decision at 17 to go down the accounting path.
Absolutely. Now, you also mentioned, you had this external success, but inwardly, parts of you were not, firing on all cylinders. I and liken this to a table. You'd have like your life is your flat surface, but the legs are probably one is shorter, and so obviously the table was wobbly there. Can you maybe describe that period and what sort of emotions or thoughts signaled that
Yeah.
to you or showcased? Because if anybody else was seeing you, you were successful.
Yeah, I guess it depended on which lens people were looking at. So in the workspace, yeah, I was ticking all those boxes. Maybe a little bit, strung out at times because I was under pressure, and those types of things. On the flip side, though, I had in doing a big project that was 10 years ago today that we, this week that we started it, which was a really awesome project and probably one of the best pieces of work I've ever delivered in my life. But it took a lot out of me on a physical sense. And so I came out of that with health being really out of whack. So then I've kept going in the consulting space and doing these big projects. And in bringing the best of myself to the table here, I was depleting my health. And so I just felt really stuck in that space and that I just didn't know which way to go. And the stress of different things was confusing.
Right.
So that was probably one where I felt like that table leg was really, really short. The other one was quite long. So they were really out of kilter in that sense. And then there was just, other things about, relationships and other personal things and even just connection to myself that was out of whack. And I'd noticed that I was a person who in those, just before you fall asleep type of moments when there's just you and that deep part of you in your head that I'm thinking, is this it? I go to work, I come home, I kind of try and charge the battery again to go back and do it all again. Something's missing for me, and I don't know what that is. And when I'm looking around at what a lot of my friends were doing and different things, and they were leading maybe like what you might call a conventional life, got married, they had kids, they did this stuff, they, were progressing this way in the career, and I was a little bit higgledy-piggledy on some of those elements that just didn't quite feel like it fit. And so that's where I was like going, is this for me? Is this it? And then I had this conversation with a friend where, you know, when you have you're whinging about work or different things. And then she said something like, yeah, I know I whinge about stuff, but fundamentally, I love my job. And I thought to myself, oh, but I do not. That would be why when people would ask me about work, I would say backhand comments like, I don't hate it. Very, very different from saying, yeah, there's moments about work and there's always stuff that you don't love, or there's circumstances that are happening at a point in time that aren't ticking your boxes. But overall, you're in harmony with the decisions you've made and the direction you've taken. And I'm like, I don't think I am at all. There's certain elements about my job I love. And when I reflected back on a lot of stuff, particularly my audit life, I hated looking at financial statements and reviewing financial statements, which was the end game in every audit. But if someone said to me, can you help me decide and work through some career development stuff, or can you write this training material? I'd be like, sure, would you like me to work all weekend? Happy to do it. So the energy was very different depending on what kind of pocket of work that was. And so what I started to do before I even started working with a coach, I was starting to pay attention to what gave me energy and what depleted it, and what was really, I guess, draining, and desperately draining my energy.
So like Marie Kondo, you started doing Marie Kondo in your life.
Yeah, exactly. I was doing Marie Kondo before she even was talking about Spark Joy. But it was exactly that. I had to start to have a look and to say, well, which way, what feels good? And am I spending too much time over-indexing in the areas that actually drain me rather than over-indexing in the areas that make me feel good and lift me up? And how do I start joining the dots on that?
Absolutely. And I quite like how you said you'd go home and recharge the batteries, but it wasn't recharging the batteries that you needed. You literally needed a jolt, like a jump start, which came in the form of this conversation with this electrician. And,
yes.
Obviously that created a pattern break for you, which you now started seeing, wait a minute, this person is not even, maybe, I'm going to say this with almost love and respect, not as smart as I am, but look at what they have done with their life. And it seems like they're happy and things of that nature. What was it about the Sparky that sparked it for you?
Well, I think it was a case of, because it was such a massive shift.
Right.
And I'm thinking, I've been trying to figure stuff out for about 8 years. From when I, left PwC and embarked on a different phase, so I'd had this phase up until this point. And then it was like, where do I go next? And I was turning my hand at doing, being the subject matter expert in transformation projects on the IT side. And then I was doing other projects, that in that transformational space, in other areas. And again, there was lots of elements that I liked about those, but it still didn't quite fit. And so I felt so compelled. I remember the week that I had this conversation with Matt, the electrician, because I was actually cancelling any other lunches and coffees that I had on the particular week when I asked him to have coffee with me because I was too busy at work. And his was the only meeting I kept, because I was just like, how on earth did you do this? Because every time I tried to move outside the lines, I got really freaked out and stayed within them. So I was changing direction or expanding myself, but I was still within the same kind of lines, the tram lines I tend to call them. And he had completely shifted. And when I had a conversation with him, he said, so what do you actually want? Like, where do you want to be? Where are you going? And I couldn't answer the question. And I always felt like anytime someone was asking me those questions, I felt like I was a bullet train, and all the good stuff that I could tap into was on the platforms, but the bullet train was going so fast it couldn't stop at the station and I couldn't access them. So everything was a blur around me. I was just heading in this direction, didn't know how to get off the train, and everything was a blur. And so he kept really kind of getting under my skin about what do you want? Or he's like, I think most people know what they want. You just haven't connected with it. And that was really starting to irritate me. I was getting really irritated in this conversation because it was triggering something that was telling me maybe it's time that I figure this out. I'm feeling blur. I'm feeling really unsettled, but I have no idea as to where I want to go. So I'm going to keep repeating all of this if I can't figure that out.
You see, Bree, if you tell a caterpillar it's going to be a butterfly, it will laugh at you all the way to the cocoon.
Correct, because the caterpillar believes it's just going to be a big, juicy caterpillar.
Right. So I'm just trying to figure out that sort of transition because, first of all, the reason you were not leaving was because, like you keep referring to it, tram lines. It is a part that was carved out for you. It's all that you've known. You even used words like it was a sunk cost. You know what I mean? Like conversations to literally get to the core of having you understand that, hey, you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when he's asking me what I want, and I can't answer it. I'm like, maybe it's about time that I started to try and connect with that. That was part of, I guess, the friction point. And then he said to me, so we could work together and in 12 months' time, what's the worst that could happen? You could actually completely change your life and everything's amazing. Or at worst, you've invested a little bit of time and money, but you're at least at the status quo. You know, you're not going to go backwards. You're at status quo. And I went like this. And I thought, if I am still feeling like this in 12 months' time, that's not okay. So it's like I had been trying to figure stuff out by myself and kept repeating the same patterns. And so I think by him asking me a couple of questions that showed me that I couldn't answer them and I was struggling to figure stuff out, it was like he was showing me the door to the cocoon. Walk into this cocoon and something different is going to happen.
My question there was that still the Bree that was afraid to not get it right, or was the transformation beginning now?
She was still afraid to not get it right, but the idea of staying where I was and that not being right is what tipped me over to actually saying, let's start veering off this path and try something different. So, but at that time, I wasn't making career decisions. I was just starting to explore myself. But funnily enough, within about 2 months' time, I tapped out of the management consulting work that I was doing and I took a break and I never really went back.
Okay.
And what I did notice was when people would ring me to ask me if I wanted to, you know, be involved in this particular project, I remember being on the phone and recoiling. I was literally, my whole body was moving away from the phone because I didn't want to say yes. And so I started to listen to what my body was also telling me, because what's going on with us is our body doesn't lie to us. And so my body recoiling from the conversation that said, hey, would you like to head up this project? And I was like, oh, hell no. That's what that's telling me. I really appreciate the phone call, but no. And so it took a little while for me to even decide to go into coaching. I was still figuring out other stuff, but coaching wasn't in the plan yet either.
Right. And you had support when you jumped into this, or when you started, you know, the parents and things like that. Did they still have the same sentiments when you'd walked away from a perfectly good airplane that was headed towards chartered accountancy areas where...
Yep, they still did. So my brother had already done a massive pivot in his work life prior to, so they were already, I guess, primed. They were like, okay, that's interesting. You know, what are you doing? You know, what are you doing about all of this, or what is it? But I think at the end of the day, they've just trusted that we know how to look after ourselves and that we follow the direction that we want to follow.
Fantastic.
And they're there to be the safety net if we need it.
I love that. I love that a lot. And the reason why I'm really excited about where we've now arrived is you've had the lived experience. You've been to the part where you've, you know, climbed the corporate ladder, which is what everybody wants. You've had all the interesting accolades and things of that nature, and
Mm.
yet it was not enough for you, or you just didn't feel as if that was the direction you needed to
Mm.
go, and I feel like with what you're now doing, helping people figure out themselves as well. Tell us a little bit about your coaching, because your coaching now focuses on helping people discover their true desires, and they don't have to wait 30 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's very much around helping you connect to yourself, because often we know something's not quite right, or there's these points of friction, and we might describe them as I don't have enough time, or I can't do this, or I have to do it this way, or I've got these obligations. And so at times we look at strategies and different things to sort of see how we can solve that. But we don't spend any time actually looking at what we want and what got us to where we are now. And what are those thoughts we've got? What are those desires that we've perhaps forgotten we had? So I started to remind myself of things I used to talk about as a teenager that I loved to do, or that I had, this idea about that it wasn't part of the life of the chartered accountant. So I completely forgot that side of me existed because it just started to operate in a different direction. We also, when we're in those roles, we follow what everybody else is doing around us because we're all in it together. So we start to behave and do things fairly consistently, same, but different, with the people around us. And so I know a friend and I have talked about how, like, about a year into being in the graduate program, what did we all do? We all bought new cars because we had some money, and we all bought new cars. And I can almost even tell you now what everybody bought, because it was the thing. And then the thing was to go off overseas and work overseas. And so we all just did a variation of that. And so when you're around people that are going in the same river current as you, it feels really dangerous to branch off somewhere else because everyone else is going in the same current. And so I guess what I'm doing with my coaching is I'm inviting people to come back to themselves, to remind themselves of who they are and what they wanted, and where that disconnect might be between their inner self and the life they have created, of which lots of it's really, really awesome, and to bring the two together and to look at what that actually is. And where I might have had a story around I've got to do it the right way, or I'm not quite right to get to these levels, everybody's carrying a version of stories about themselves. And it's the story that's the internal interference between where you are now and where you want to be.
Now, fish, you did mention fish in some sort of a current,
Mm-hmm.
and I just remembered that salmon at some point in their life, they go
Swim
against
upstream.
the stream,
Yeah.
right? But fish do not see the water that they're swimming in, and neither do people see the air that they breathe. So amongst whatever you guys were doing, it felt right, safe. And I don't think you were looking at any other careers or any other people because they didn't exist in the utopia that you guys had built as
Exactly.
CAs or emerging CAs. And that was a story, like you say, which is what a lot of people keep telling themselves. Now, how do you help people rewrite these narratives and unblock their potential? Because this is all we've ever known. You can never tell me any different than what I know today. And I would think that's how I'm supposed to live my life. I don't know how you would be able to maybe do that pattern break.
Yeah. What a lot of it is it comes back to I kept staying in the pattern because I didn't have a desired outcome. I didn't have something that I really wanted that was going to give me the context for wanting to override myself to actually swim upstream against what is predictable, is familiar, and therefore predictable, because humans, that's how we like to operate. That's our caveman survival brain. It needs to be familiar to create predictability. So I didn't have any of that context. So I didn't want some of the stuff that I wanted, but I didn't have a reason to circuit break it and to override and to lean into the effort that was necessary to override the autopilot of just, this is how my day runs. So a lot of what I do is starting with trying to get underneath what is something that somebody actually wants that would actually be very meaningful to them if they could achieve it or shift things. Because at the point that you start to lock in emotionally, the emotional element is really important. You've got to be able to feel it in your body. When you are emotionally connected to something, you've now got a reason to do something different. And so what we're doing is we're looking for where we want to drop the pin on the GPS for like the desired destination. We also need to excavate the thoughts and the feelings and the actions that have got us to where we are now. And we need both of those pins dropped in a GPS in order for the route to show up. Because if you don't look at either of those, you're missing two vital points of the process.
With what you're saying, representation matters, or a frame of reference, or some sort of a yardstick, or how do we say it? Like Roger Bannister was the first person to run the 4 minute mile,
Yes.
and now people have, some sort of frame of reference, a starting point. But if you look at the world we live in today, we only have people that are famous for 5 seconds, and automatically, that now becomes an aspiration. But if something hot comes, people no longer have that standard. Hey, that could be the North Star. How then are you maybe helping clients to gain this sort of clarity? Because many people don't quite know, like you say, who you wanted to be, because there's just so much you're exposed to it in life.
What I find really interesting is probably what made me a really good auditor that actually is quite transferable into the coaching space is especially in audit, and even people would say with accounting, I didn't spend time in spreadsheets. I was telling stories with information, and there's patterns. And people talk in patterns. There are things that they say about themselves that comes up multiple times. But they don't hear it because it's their story and it's their lived experience. Like you said, fish can't see the water. We can't see the air we breathe. It's that same kind of thing. The stories you have and the perceptions you have about yourself are hard to see. So even though I thought I was quite self-aware back before I did coaching, I kind of knew stuff about myself, but I didn't know the impact they were having. And I didn't know exactly kind of how I got there or why I thought that, and therefore how could I change that. I believed it to be true. Like a belief is just something that we believe with 100% certainty that it's a fact, but it's not. It's a story. And so I had a level, I thought I had some self-awareness, but I didn't. So when I'm actually meeting with people and doing my little open house coaching, sort of 5-day one-to-one little sessions, there's usually some patterns that come out when I'm asking questions in where it's headed. And it starts to show that it's almost like if we could start working here first, this ripple effect opens up and the possibility of different things open up. And so there's patterns in that. But even if you just drop a pin somewhere that's different to where you are now, as soon as you start to take an action towards that, all the stories start to surface, because we desire status quo. It's the familiar and the predictable that ensures our survival as, the human species. So the minute we start to change something, all the stories come up, because also the unfamiliarity that exists is we don't see ourselves to be that person who does that thing. Whether it's just going for a run in the morning when you normally sleep in, like think about people say, I'm not a morning person, or I am a morning person. So the minute we just drop a pin somewhere and start moving towards it, it unearths more things. So it's just giving you a place to start. And that destination might move, but it's about getting more and more clarity from each of those steps that you take forward. So I look at it across like the coaching space, and what I'm doing with clients is going like, the first pillar is discovery. You need to zero in on where you are now and where you might want to go, so that at least we've got some context to get moving. And then it's about designing. the new model, because you've got to be a different version of yourself to deliver on what you've just decided, and discovered in terms of where you want to go. The version of you that creates this new outcome has to be different to the version who's operating today. So parts of yourself have got to die off in order for other parts to flourish. And you've got to move beyond the edges of what feels familiar and predictable, often referred to as the comfort zone. All that is the boundary of your identity, or as I like to call it, your own glass ceiling. Because there's something that's stopping you from going beyond that level, but you might not even know what it is. Or you've got an idea of what it is, but sitting underneath that is the problem of the problem. So what you think is the problem is more a symptom, not a cause. So it's like designing the new version of you and the new outcomes, but then you've actually got to become that new model. You've got to deliver on that. And that's going to require you to navigate uncertainty. It's going to require you to think in possibility, not in the lines or out of the lines. There's all these infinite possibilities. It's going to require you to expand your capacity and your capability of dealing with different things, learning new skills, overriding your underlying program in order to actually integrate this new model of you that gets you more of what you want. So I always look at it in terms of those three buckets. You've got to discover some elements to drop the GPS pins. You've got to actually start moving on the blue line, like in your navigation system. And all these internal obstacles and interferences and detours are going to come up. And that's my job, to help you navigate all of those and see what they're doing and the impact that these thoughts and these beliefs and these ideas you have about who you are that are actually being your glass ceiling that is stopping you getting to the place that you actually want to go.
Right.
So each person's journey and interferences and stories are slightly different, but everyone's mind works the same way.
You see, indulge me here for a little bit, Bree. See, where I come from, when you get to the age of 16 for boys and I think 13 for girls, you're called in by the village elders, and then they proverbially tap you on the shoulder, and then they tell you it's your turn to lead. And pretty much after that, you now are allowed to be involved in adult conversations. You can now, maybe go on hunting expeditions. With women, you can go gathering fruit or whatever it is, just so that you learn the skills to look after your family. All right. And then when you come back, you then are given a week or two where you get to choose whether you apprentice yourself to a hunter or cobbler or a shoemaker or whatever trade, so that you can learn something new. And that's where we get the statement, it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
And that now, when you then get back, you're no longer a child. You're no longer a kid. And for those in the Western world, it's like if you sleep on the couch, after that, nobody picks you up and puts you to bed because you're an adult now. So if your neck wakes up hurting, then it means that's your fault. Okay. Yeah. So, and it's akin or somehow something like a rite of passage. But around here, there's nothing like that. Okay, they might have something like a quinceanera in Mexico, or a bar mitzvah, with the Jewish people, but everybody else just grows up. There's not that pattern break or that period that tells you you're an adult now. Could it be that what you're doing is akin to a rite of passage where you're telling all these fully grown babies, hey, this is your turn to become an adult so you can do and have a happier existence? I don't know what you...
It's a really interesting way to put it, but I think it's like one of the things I often say is really about what I'm doing here is I'm helping you to be more you. So it is that kind of pattern break of going, I've just been doing this. And I think often the people I work with are the over 40s, because you've just gone through life of, say, like our adulthood is you turn 18 and you can vote, you can drink alcohol and you can drive a car, and all those things kind of happen. But and you're generally going to university. So you've kind of picked some sort of career direction. But then we just follow a pattern of we start working, we progress, we then find a mate, we decide to have children or not, we get a house, we get a bigger house, we get a car, we get a better car, we go on some more exotic trips. But everyone kind of follows that pattern. But nowhere in there, or often there's not anything in there that says, what do you really want? And who are you really? And what's that kind of bigger destiny that you want for yourself in your life? Which is why I think often it's like we tick off all these adult goals, supposed adult goals, and then we go, well, but what else is there? I feel unfulfilled, and there's all this friction in my life, which is I don't have time. I've got all these people competing for my attention. I've forgotten to do the things I love to do. So one of the things that I do all the time, every week, is dance. And I've done it since I was 5 years old, because that is one of those things that gives me high energy and makes me feel the most like myself. So also when we're then transitioning into this kind of adulthood, we then leave behind who we were as children. And then we feel really disconnected because we've left a part of ourselves behind. And so then by what I'm trying to do is bring them together. It's that outer image of life we've created. There's the inner image of who we are at the deep. There's some points of disconnection that the two of those aren't blended. And some of that often is we've left the child and ourselves behind, that we haven't brought them on the journey. And we've just forgotten to explore because life just gets busy lifing. And we just, it just becomes, like we said, like the current. And the idea of swimming against the current and being the salmon that's going up, upstream is hard. And you've got everybody else telling you to stay where you are. So the amount of times when I started to go in a different direction, people would be like, but you're really good at what you do. And I'm like, yeah, and I really don't like it that much. So I've got to figure something else out. So just because you're good at it doesn't mean it lights your fire. But then how do I take the bits that made me good at what I did over there and pick it up over here? So I often say, I make like an accounting joke about the kind of the coaching. It's like I used to do work in the consulting space to help you put more margin in your business. And what I'm doing now is helping you put more margin in your life. Because it just more fulfillment equals more joy. And if I'm on that journey doing that, it's no fun if there's no one else at the party. I remember a friend saying that, and I'm like, that is such a great way to describe it as to why wouldn't you want to help others? It becomes the mission to help people experience that same transformation that you have, which is really about connecting with yourself and your own desires and taking some action to bring them to life.
Absolutely. I think helping other people, Bree, is just safeguarding yourself. Otherwise, those people are going to just be bringing you down, or or you're going to have to continuously pick them up yourself. Now, what would be the best way that people can actually start putting more margin in their lives? Where would they go on the internet, and how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So I would love to connect with people on LinkedIn. You can find me quite easily on LinkedIn. That is often where I am showing up and sharing lots of information. But one of the key things that I offer to people, that if anyone is interested in doing this, I would love to hear from you. And that is, often people don't really understand what the power of coaching can actually do and how that can really take that pilot light that is inside them and turn it into a flame. So what I offer is a 5-session, one-to-one, what I'm calling like you version 2025 open house of coaching. And we're going to take you on a little mini transformation that starts to lock in on who you want to be, what's stopping you from getting started, what there might interference be, and how do you become the new model, all in one little hit. So if you can DM me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to actually explore that, or you can also find me at success@b.extraordinarygroup.com.
Absolutely. I'll definitely make sure that all those links are in the show notes so that people can make their way and create more margin in their lives. I like that. I am so going to steal that. Now, if one of these people just so happens to be Bree at 26, who's at a crossroads and doesn't quite know whether to keep working towards, the PwC route or just be chartered and go and work in industry, and maybe contemplating a career change or a life change, but feeling a little bit apprehensive, what sort of advice would you offer her to encourage them to take that first step?
Yeah, I think the starting point would be to actually spend some time connecting in with those things about yourself or that you used to say that you really wanted to do or achieve in life. But it's focusing on how you want to feel, not what you want to have. It's how do you want to be and how do you want to feel. And so that starting point is going to start to tell you, so like your body's going to tell you what it needs from you. Because if it's all about trying to chase certain definitions of success, and that's what's going to, that you feel like I better stay the path that I'm on, it's not going to feel good. It's going to feel disconnected. It's going to feel awkward. It's going to feel blocked. So it's like when you're thinking about where you want to go, lean into how does it feel and how do you want to feel as you actually go through your life. And I think for me, at each of those points, those earlier ones, I wanted to feel differently than what I did, but I let my head take charge. And I didn't pay attention to the feeling bit. And I think if I knew that earlier, the two of them would have been party to the conversation, and I might have then had different conversations with people around me or who I was looking to for support in exploring different options.
Wow.
But I wasn't really leaning into that. And I think it got to the point when I spoke to Matt the electrician, I didn't feel good. And the idea of feeling like that for much longer, I just couldn't do it. So I had to go and explore something to see if I could change the feeling.
Now, Bree, it would be remiss for me to not ask this question. Did you find what you were looking for?
That is a really interesting question. And I don't know if I can say with a resounding yes, but I definitely know I'm on the path.
Oh, fantastic.
Because I think it's like I've opened up so much more possibility and I'm learning to think in possibility and continue to expand myself. And so from that perspective, it's like each bit is moving me forward.
Absolutely.
And I know that what I left behind wasn't going to allow me to feel like this.
Absolutely. Well, Bree, I can't thank you enough for the journey that you took, because that allowed us to have such a transformative episode today. I mean, you sharing your inspiring journey and your profound insights that you gained along the way, I think is also going to ignite that fire that somebody wanted, just that permission, which I think you have just given people permission to explore.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was looking for a lot, was that I almost needed permission. And when I wasn't leaning into that feeling and then searching out people, the people I was interacting with generally weren't giving me the permission slip that I needed.
Absolutely.
But I didn't know that that's what I was looking for.
Well, and obviously your story just reminds us of the power of self-reflection and the courage it actually takes for you to pursue life aligned with your true desires. I spoke to a really, really rich woman today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Now, for those that are watching, thank you so much for tuning in. I mean, obviously, there's so much that we covered in this show today, and I think Bree's experience is a lesson that a lot of us didn't know we needed. And if these experiences resonated with you, I want you to consider exploring how her coaching can actually guide you towards your own extraordinary life. You can learn more about her work at b.extraordinary.group. I will put all those links in the show notes below. And don't forget to check out her contributions in the Change Makers. I mean, we didn't talk about this, but it's something they will discover. Series on Amazon. And yeah, I'm just really excited. We've finally got to pen this one down. Did we hit record? Yes, we did. Fantastic. And as we wrap up, I really encourage you to subscribe to the Online Prosperity Show for more insightful conversations like this. And in our next episode, we're going to dive into ideas that can lead you to a happier existence. And if you found value in today's discussion, please share this podcast with somebody who might actually benefit from this, somebody who's stuck in their career, or somebody who just needs that permission slip that Bree can actually afford them. And remember, the journey to prosperity begins with a single step. Until next time, bye for now.